You caught them. You have the proof. You confronted them. And now, in the hours and days that follow, something is happening. Something that most people are too overwhelmed to notice. Too flooded with emotion to see clearly. But it is happening. Right in front of you. And what you observe in this window, this specific window right after discovery, will tell you almost everything you need to know about whether this person will do it again. Almost everything. If you know what to look for. Today, we are going to walk through 5 things, 5 specific, documented, psychologically understood behaviors that cheaters display right after being caught. Not the ones that make headlines. Not the dramatic gestures. The quiet ones. The ones that slip past you when you are drowning in pain. The ones that matter most. Pay attention. Because your gut already knows. We are just going to give it the language. Number 1. The partial confession. Also known, in psychological literature, as trickle truth. Here is how it works. You confront them with evidence. They deny. You show more evidence. They admit to a fraction. You push harder. They admit a little more. Always, stopping just short of the full truth. Dripping it out. Drop by drop. Until you are so exhausted from pulling that you stop asking. And they mistake your silence for resolution. Trickle truth is not accidental. It is a calculated information management strategy. The person disclosing is constantly monitoring your emotional threshold, watching how much you can handle, and releasing just enough to appear cooperative while withholding enough to retain control. The key indicator that you are receiving trickle truth rather than the full account is this. Every time you discover new information, they already knew it. They were not surprised. You were. That asymmetry of surprise is your signal. He confessed 3 times. I found out later it was closer to 30. Every time I found something new, he would say, "Okay, there's something else I should tell you." Like he was doing me a favor. Like he was being honest. He was never honest. He was being strategic. And I kept believing him. Because I wanted to. Because the alternative was too big to look at directly. The partial confession kept me in the relationship for 8 extra months. 8 months of thinking, we were working through the truth. We were not. We were working through the version of the truth she had decided I could handle. The full picture, I only got that after we separated. And it was 3 times worse than what I had been given. 3 times. What to watch for. If new information keeps emerging after the initial confession, information they already knew, you are not receiving honesty. You are receiving managed disclosure. And managed disclosure serves one person. The person managing it. The moment I understood trickle truth, everything made sense. Every conversation. Every revelation. Every time I thought we had finally reached the bottom. There was no bottom they were willing to show me. They decided where the bottom was. Not me. That was the realization that changed everything. Number 2. They become the victim. Within hours, sometimes minutes, of being caught. The narrative shifts. Suddenly the conversation is no longer about what they did. It is about how hard things have been for them. How lonely they felt. How unsupported. How the relationship had problems. Problems you perhaps did not even know existed. Until this moment. When those problems became very convenient. This behavior is called DARVO. Deny. Attack. Reverse victim and offender. It is one of the most well-documented post-discovery responses in psychological literature. The person who has caused harm repositions themselves as the person who has been harmed. This serves 2 functions. First, it redirects the conversation away from their behavior and onto yours. Second, it triggers your empathy. And if your empathy is triggered, you stop pressing for accountability. You start offering comfort instead. To the person who hurt you. The moment the conversation about their behavior becomes a conversation about your shortcomings, that is the shift. Accountability looks like, I did this. I am responsible. DARVO looks like, I did this because of you. Those 2 words, because you, are the signal. Because you are not accountable. Because you are a redirect. The word that gave it away for me was but. I am so sorry, but. I take full responsibility, but. You deserve better, but. Every sentence with a but in the middle is two sentences. And only one of them is honest. Listen to what comes after the but. That is the real one. Number 3. The grand gesture. This is the one that catches most people. Because it feels like love. It looks like love. It is designed, carefully, instinctively, sometimes deliberately, to look exactly like love. Flowers. Letters. Public declarations. Surprise trips. The sudden, overwhelming, almost desperate demonstration of affection that arrives, always, right after discovery. Right when you are most vulnerable. Right when you need most desperately to believe that this person loves you. The post-discovery grand gesture is well understood in behavioral psychology. It functions as a pattern interrupt. When a person is processing betrayal, their nervous system is in a state of acute threat response. The grand gesture introduces a powerful competing stimulus: love, affection, the relationship at its most idealized. This does not address the betrayal. It temporarily overwhelms the processing of it. Research consistently shows that partners who receive grand gestures immediately post-discovery are significantly more likely to delay meaningful accountability conversations. The gesture buys time. That is its primary function. Regardless of whether the person deploying it consciously understands this. He booked a trip. 2 days after I found out. He booked a trip to the place we had always talked about going. And I went. I actually went. Because standing there with the tickets in his hand, he looked like the person I fell in love with. He looked like the man I wanted him to be. And I chose that. Over what I knew. For 10 days. 10 days of pretending. And then we came home. And nothing had changed. Because a trip does not change anything. I know that now. I did not know it then. The letter she wrote me was 3 pages long. Handwritten. It was the most beautiful thing anyone had ever written to me. I read it so many times that the paper got soft at the folds. And every time I got angry, every time I started to see clearly, I would read the letter. And go back. That letter kept me in a situation I should have left for almost a year. 3 pages of beautiful words. Written by someone who had been lying to my face for 14 months. Words are easy. I understand that now. Words are the easiest thing there is. What to watch for. The question is not whether the gesture is beautiful. The question is what it is replacing. A grand gesture in place of a full, honest account is not love. It is a distraction. Genuine remorse does not arrive with flowers. Genuine remorse arrives with discomfort. Sitting in the wreckage without trying to redecorate it. Ask what you need. Not deciding what you need and delivering it. Watch what the gesture is interrupting. That will tell you everything. She said sorry with actions? That is how she put it. Sorry with actions. And for a while, I believed that. Until I realized the actions were for her. Doing things made her feel better. Made her feel like she was fixing it. My healing, what I actually needed, was never part of the conversation. What I needed was answers. What I got was a weekend away. Those are not the same thing. Asterisk. Number 4. They weaponize your empathy. This one is the most painful to talk about. Because it targets the best thing about you. Your capacity to care. Your ability to see another person's pain. Your instinct, even in your own worst moments, to ask if someone else is okay. That capacity. That is what gets used. Highly empathic individuals are disproportionately targeted by this behavior. Because their default response to witnessing distress, even the distress of someone who has harmed them, is to move toward comfort rather than away from it. The person who has caused the betrayal learns, consciously or not, that displaying distress shifts their partner from confrontational mode to caregiving mode. The result is that the person who has been harmed ends up managing the emotional state of the person who harmed them. This dynamic, if unaddressed, becomes the template for the relationship going forward. And it predicts reoffense with significant reliability. I spent 4 months after discovery making sure he was okay. Checking in on him. Asking how he was processing. Whether he was sleeping. Whether he needed to talk. I was the one who had been cheated on. And I was running the emotional support system for both of us. Because every time I got angry, every time I needed something, he would look so broken that I would stop and take care of him instead. My therapist eventually said to me, "Whose pain is being centered in this relationship?" And I could not answer. Because it was not mine. It was never mine. She would cry. Every time I tried to have an honest conversation, she would cry. And I would end up comforting her. And then the conversation would be over. And nothing would have been resolved. And I would feel guilty for upsetting her. I felt guilty for trying to talk about the fact that she had cheated on me. I felt like I was being cruel by asking for the truth. That is what weaponized empathy does. It makes you feel like the aggressor for needing things. What to watch for. Whose pain is at the center of every conversation after discovery. If you consistently leave those conversations having taken care of their emotions, and none of your own questions has been answered, that is the pattern. Accountability requires tolerating your partner's pain without making it the focus. If they cannot do that, if every conversation about what they did becomes a conversation about how hard this is for them, that is the answer. You just have to be willing to see it. The thing nobody tells you is that weaponized empathy is almost impossible to identify while it is happening. Because it does not feel like manipulation. It feels like love. It feels like, this person is suffering, and I can help. That is what love feels like. The difference is, love does not consistently require you to abandon your own needs to manage someone else's feelings. That is not love. That is a system. And you are the one keeping it running. Number 5. They rush the timeline. Recovery has a pace. A natural, uncomfortable, non-negotiable pace. And people who are genuinely committed to change, who understand what they have done and what it costs, they respect that pace. They sit in it. They do not rush it. People who are going to do it again, rush it. Not always obviously. Not always with impatience. Sometimes with love. Sometimes with exhaustion. Sometimes with the very reasonable sounding suggestion that perhaps it is time to move forward. The pressure to accelerate the recovery timeline post-betrayal is one of the strongest predictors of recidivism in relationship infidelity. When a partner who has cheated begins to indicate, overtly or subtly, that the discovery phase should be concluding, they are prioritizing their own discomfort over their partner's genuine healing process. Genuine recovery from betrayal trauma typically requires 12 to 24 months of sustained, consistent behavioral change. Not a conversation. Not a gesture. Not a declaration. 12 to 24 months. Of showing up differently. Every single day. Partners who are not prepared to hold that timeline, who begin pushing for normalcy within weeks or months, are statistically significantly more likely to reoffend. 6 weeks after discovery, he asked me when I was going to be able to trust him again. 6 weeks. And he asked it like it was a reasonable question. Like there was a schedule. Like trust is something you produce on request. And I remember thinking, I do not know. Maybe never. And I said that. And he looked wounded. Like I had said something cruel. 6 weeks. He wanted a timeline. 6 weeks after he blew up my entire life. Are we okay yet? That was the question. Are we okay yet? He asked for it for the first time 3 months in. And I said no. And he asked again at 5 months. And I said no. And at 7 months he stopped asking. And started acting like we were okay. Whether I had confirmed it or not. He just decided. And rearranged his behavior around that decision. And 6 months later he did it again. Because he had never actually done the work. He had just waited. Long enough for things to feel normal. And then gone back to who he was. The timeline rush feels like love at first sight. It sounds like, I miss us. I want us back. I want to feel close to you again. And those things might even be true. But they are true for them. What they are really saying is, I am uncomfortable with the consequences of my actions. And I would like them to be over now. The person who will genuinely change says instead, take all the time you need. I will still be here. And then they prove it. Over time. Without asking when the time will end. We have talked about 5 things that predict reoffense. But this would not be complete, it would not be honest, without talking about what genuine change actually looks like. Because it exists. People do change. Relationships do survive betrayal. Not all of them. Not most of them. But some. And the ones that do, look very different from what we have just described. Genuine post-betrayal change has several consistent markers. First, full and unsolicited disclosure. The person who has cheated volunteers information rather than waiting to be caught in layers. Second, they do not center their own pain in recovery conversations. They tolerate discomfort. They sit in your anger without deflecting it. Third, they seek individual support. Therapy. Accountability structures. Something outside the relationship where they are examining their own behavior. Fourth, they do not rush. They understand that trust is rebuilt in years, not months. And they demonstrate that understanding through sustained behavioral consistency. Not words. Behavior. Over time. When I finally met someone who had genuinely changed after cheating in a previous relationship, the difference was immediate. He talked about it without being prompted. He acknowledged the harm without minimizing it. He did not ask me to trust him. He said, watch me. Just watch what I do. That is the difference. The ones who will do it again ask for trust. Those who have actually changed say, watch me. And then they give you something to watch. Us bring this back to where we started. You caught them. You have the proof. You confronted them. And now you are watching. Maybe without knowing you are watching. Maybe without knowing what to look for. Now you know. The partial confession that keeps the full truth just out of reach. The victim narrative that redirects your pain into their story. The grand gesture that overwhelms your processing with the idea of love. The weaponized empathy that turns your care against you. And the rushed timeline that tells you, more clearly than anything else, whether this person is doing the work. Or waiting for the work to be declared finished. I wish someone had shown me this list 2 years ago. Not because it would have made the decision easy. Nothing makes that decision easy. But because I spent 2 years feeling crazy. Feeling like I was overreacting. Feeling like the problem was my inability to forgive. When actually, I was just watching. And what I was watching was telling me the truth. I just did not have the language for it yet. Now I do. And I am okay. I want people to know that. I am okay. The thing about these 5 signs is that they are not proof that someone will never change. They are proof that they have not changed yet. There is a difference. And that difference matters. Because you get to decide, based on what you observe, whether yet is something you can wait for. Or whether yet is too long. That is your decision. Nobody else's. Yours. Your instincts brought you here. Something felt wrong. Something was being hidden. Something in the way they held the phone. Or came home late. Or looked at you, or did not. Your instincts were right. They always were. We just spend so much time talking ourselves out of what we already know. Because knowing is terrifying. And not knowing, however painful, still contains the possibility that we are wrong. That it is fine. That we are overreacting. We are not overreacting. We never were. Trust the quiet voice. It has never lied to you. Did any of these 5 sound familiar? Subscribe to The Quiet Witness, news stories and insights every week. Red flags. Quiet betrayal. Real consequences. The quiet ones always leave a trail. We just help you see it.